Okay, and we're live. We've got episode 5 of our Coffee Expeditions podcast. Today I have an amazing guest. I was thinking to myself, like, to say that this is, humbling and a privilege is a huge understatement. The fact that this guest is coming on for my little podcast here is just really, really a privilege. I want to introduce, his name is John Stryker Meyer. He's an author, but he is also a veteran of the Vietnam War. John, if you just could maybe just introduce yourself real quick, that'd be great.
Good morning, John Stryker Meyer, out here in the lovely downtown White Bluff, Tennessee, connecting with you electronically, Reed.
Yeah.
Thanks for checking in. I appreciate it.
We made it work finally. Thank you so much. One thing that, I met you through, well, how I was introduced to you was through Jocko's podcasts, the episode 180, 181, and 182. If people haven't actually listened to those, I'd highly recommend it. I've listened to a lot of podcasts over the last like 10, 12 years, and those are probably 3 of the top ones that I'd ever listened to. And then, of course, I've, read your books, Across the Fence and On the Ground. And we got to kind of know each other a little bit because I reached out to you for a signed copy of your book, and your generosity absolutely blew me away. I was like, it's so nice of you. You sent a copy to me, and we've been able to kind of stay in touch ever since. So when I reached out to you for this podcast, I didn't actually think I'd have a chance to get you on. So the fact that you've actually agreed is just, again, it's really, really a privilege.
Well, anything for a firefighter, you know that.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was gonna start with that. So where did you grow up, and kind of want to talk about what led you to get into the military, and then we'll talk about your role in there and whatnot. But
Well, basically, I grew up in Trenton, New Jersey. Dad was a milkman. My mom was a choir director, organist for a church, and it was just basically a dull life, just growing up in the ghetto,
Right.
And
In Trenton.
we just didn't know. We were like lower middle class or whatever that category. We were happy, grew up always playing baseball, football, sports, went to high school. Not a good student. Went to college. It took me 2 years to flunk out at the Trenton State College, and never really had thought much about the military. But when I flunked out, my dad goes, "The draft board's coming for you." This is 1966, and back then there was still an active draft. And so went, and I was working in Yosemite at the time, Yosemite National Park. And after I got that note from my dad, I read the book, The Green Berets. And, we had history classes. We knew about Southeast Asia, about Vietnam, but we didn't have all the ins and outs about all the politics. So I just learned a lot in that book. And when we were going down, I talked to a couple of people who've been drafted, and they got, when you get drafted, you had 8 weeks of basic training, 8 weeks of advanced infantry training, a month leave, and then you were shipped to Vietnam, assigned to a regular army unit.
Right. Yeah.
I'm a city slicker. My mom wouldn't even let me have a cap pistol in the house until my granddad overruled her.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
we were very concerned, So I knew I needed more training. I read that book, and these people were trained to like to think out of the box, and they were a different kind of soldier, very unique in a unique war. I said, "Oh, if I can do this," I went down to the Army recruiter, talked to him, told him what I wanted to do, enlisted for airborne on assignment through basic training, advanced infantry, and then during advanced infantry training, we had the opportunity to apply for special forces. So they ran us through a battery of psychological tests, physical, run, jump, swim, prove that you can swim. And then at the end of it, they brought us all in, and half the guys were dismissed because they didn't make it. And then they kept another group. They kept bringing in each one. I'm the last one. When I go in, the sergeant goes, Meyer, you're lucky we lowered the standards. So I was in, and here we are. The rest is history.
Man, it's incredible. So just to backtrack for 2 seconds, so you played quite a bit of sports growing up, then, did you, or was that a
Nothing.
big part of it?
Yeah, I in ninth grade, I love baseball, and I threw my arm out in ninth grade at junior high school. Myself and Larry Hilton were the competitors for the opening game,
Right.
and our ninth grade team had beat the high school JV team, which had 10th and 11th graders, because
Oh
we were
wow.
pretty good pitchers. But this is
Yeah.
ninth grade. Anyway, I threw my
Yeah.
arm out, and then played soccer at high school. My last year, my dad wouldn't let me play football until my senior year, and I loved it. Just loved playing sports, but I wasn't that good. I was a music major. Went to college for 2 years. Like I said, I flunked out.
Oh well. You went to college for music, you said?
Yeah, started out as a music major.
What were you playing? Just all kinds of instruments, or?
It was I was a music major with voice and
Oh,
piano as a minor.
wow. Interesting. I did not know that you'd done that. That's interesting. I play a little bit of guitar, but I wouldn't say I'm good at all. But but I try hard.
While your guitar gently weeps.
Yeah, yeah. They weep when I play them. They so you flunked out of college and ended up in Yosemite. And what was your role there? I know you were only there for a little brief time, or I should say, I think
Well,
you were only
that's the
there for.
one link that you and I have.
Yeah, yeah,
My
yeah.
primary job was with a garbage man, but my secondary job was a firefighter.
Right,
It's the
yeah,
only time in my career I could truly say I was a firefighter, although I never fought any fires.
yeah.
And
were they
we had
were they
one of those
doing
because the guys I came out from New Jersey with, they were all the firefighters, and I was the garbage man. I picked up their trash. So I'm
interesting?
up there one day, and I go in, and they were getting the truck ready,
Yeah.
and I said, "What's going on?" I said, "Oh, we got a fire." I said, "Really?" So you need extra help? I said, "Nah." He said, "Come on and have lunch with us," because the assembly, it was over 6,000 feet elevation.
Oh, so it's way up there.
Yeah, so it's high.
Right.
So it wasn't burning like when I think of a fire, you
Yeah.
get your ass there and try to put it out. We had
Yeah.
lunch. They had a couple extra beers. They loaded up
Right.
the fire truck with the refrigerated unit. And they went out and fought the fire.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's sometimes it's a little different between wildland firefighting and like sort of urban or like structural firefighting. But yeah, that's cool. So and then from there you went straight to and enrolled and signed up for the army. Is that correct? Or
Correct. I came
yeah,
home. I went back to a junior college for a month, and I was in a French class, and I avoided answering any questions because I was just there marking time to see what was going to happen with the draft board and everything else.
right.
And at one point, the teacher finally came to me with a yes no question. You had to answer yes or no. So I'm in a French class, and she goes, asked me the question. I said, "Si." So I answered in Spanish.
uh,
So I said,
uh,
this is an indicator that this is the wrong track.
yeah, this is
It's
not
time
my
to deal
path.
with reality.
um, So when you entered into the army, so I'm a civilian. I've never been in the military, but I've done a lot of reading over the years, or I shouldn't say a lot, a fair bit of reading, because I've always taken a keen interest in the military. I have a huge respect for military personnel, Canadian, American, British military, and the only little bit that I can imagine what training would be like is what I've seen in the movies. So things like Full Metal Jacket in the opening scenes when they have the boot camp and the hard drill instructors. Can you
Right.
describe a little bit what that was like and like how you felt? Because I've talked to some guys and they're like, oh, it wasn't a big deal. I just kind of followed the rules and open. And then I've talked to other friends of mine that are like, oh yeah, like it was tough. It was really challenging. And I know for myself personally, I think one of the things that sounds silly, but I'd have a hard time with a guy yelling in my face an inch away from my, screaming at me for the mistakes I made or whatever. But, but how did you find that?
Well, I had the benefit of seeing a lot of World War II movies.
Right.
And so I saw what they went through, and it's a game.
Right.
It's kind of like, we're here, we're going to act like assholes. Let's see if we can break you. and get you kicked out of here. So with that back frame or framework in my mind, I just said, this is a game. I know they're going to play this, so let's go forward.
Right.
And that's the way I approached it. So whenever they threw us out of bed in the morning, they did all the bullshit.
Yeah.
We knew this is basic training. We had seen it before, and even at advanced infantry training, they hassled us. But we got to jump school. That was different.
Oh.
There, they threw you out of your beds at 2 o'clock in the morning,
Oh,
but it
really?
was the same thing.
Yeah.
It was just like, and we had guys that would crack. And then you had training, different levels of training. You jumped out of a 32-foot tower with a harness on your back just to practice getting in the door so you
Yeah.
jump out of the airplane. Well, we had guys that'd be crying for their mother up there.
Right.
No, no,
Yeah.
no! Don't throw me out. I'm going like, what are you crazy? You got this strap behind your back. You're cool. I
Yeah.
loved it. It was fun.
Yeah, I that to me, like, and not knowing how I would respond, but so everything obviously that I say is with the utmost humbleness, but it looks awesome. Some of the things that you guys get to do is just, it sounds like so much fun. I actually parachuted twice when I was younger. Once when I was 18, and once when I was 19. I got to do like a static jump and like solo, because I actually
Ooh,
wanted to go in the military. I wanted to go. Well, I dreamed of being in the Air Force since I was a little kid, but I also wanted to be, maybe a soldier. I actually wanted to be a U.S. Marine. I'd actually phoned the recruiter and asked, "Hey, is there any way I can come down from Canada and sign up?" But they were like, "Well, try your Army first." And then what ended up happening was, after seeing the recruiter, they said, go and get some more courses, because I had nothing behind me, and this was for the Air Force. And so that's what led me to firefighting. I ended up signing up for the volunteer firefighting, and then I fell in love with that, and that's the course that I stayed on. But it sounds like you enjoyed it right away, especially some of the cool things like jumping out off that platform.
oh yeah. And then they had part of it was they had like a 150-foot or 200-foot tower where they go up. And there used to be a game at state fairs where they have a parachute,
Oh,
and
cool.
the tower would lift you up, and then there'd be sand, and then you get dropped. Well, that was the coolest thing in the world. And some guys were like even flipping out with that. I'm going like, I want to do it again.
That's awesome. Yeah, yeah. That's so cool. And then did you do quite a few jumps like after that, like
Yeah, in
real
jump
jumps?
school you get 5 jumps,
Five. Yeah.
so that's part of training. And had a couple, embarrassing ones. I wound up running across a guy's parachute to try to get off it because he was taking my wind.
Oh,
And so by the time we both got down to the ground, it was a little bit of a harder landing than it should have been.
right.
But we survived
Those
it
are
all.
the big round parachutes that don't really
Yeah,
have a huge.
they
They
were
don't have a
they
lot of
were called
control, do they?
T10s. They're all round.
Yeah.
You pull the toggle switch. You had two on each side, and when you pull them down, it was really slow to react.
Right. Yeah.
It wasn't like you see today's guys with those square parachutes.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
turn and go backwards, sideways, up, down. No, no.
Yeah. That,
Ours were like
that,
you're going straight down. You turn slowly.
and you kind of hit pretty hard with those, don't you? Like, isn't it something where you have to kind of tuck your ankles over so you don't like break your ankles, or can you
Oh no,
actually like?
they call it a parachute landing fall. So
Right.
you put your legs together and then you try to go down so that whenever you land, your whole body impacts. So if you're going to the left, you land, roll, and do a complete roll. If you go forward, you land, so your legs are together. That's the theory behind
Interesting, right? Yeah,
it.
because the ones that I
Controlled
did,
falling.
sorry,
Controlled falling.
yeah, because you're coming in pretty hot on those. The ones I had were they're rectangle, like you'd said, and the nice thing with that was I had a guy talking to me through a speaker, so he was guiding me down, and a lot nicer landing. So from there, you went to advanced infantry, or after that, is that what got you into the Green Beret training?
Yeah, from after jump school, Lily got done on a Friday. Buses came. Of course, the buses were late, and we drove up to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Jump school's at Fort Benning in Georgia,
Okay.
and then from there we drove up to Bragg. Got in late at night, and we were used to being yelled at. So when we went in there, we just assumed, we got off the buses. We were waiting for the guys to come out and harass us and
Yeah.
make the usual noises. Well, we were there for like maybe 5 or 10 minutes before anybody even showed up. And so when they did show up, the guy comes out with flip flops, uh, a T-shirt, and some shorts.
Yeah.
He goes, "Welcome to Special Forces Training Group." We're all waiting, like, "Aren't you going to mess with us? Aren't you going to hassle us somehow?"
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And the guy goes, "Look, this is Special Forces training. The mess hall is over here. If you want to get a sandwich, we told them you're coming, so you can go get something to eat. And this is Friday, so the weekend is yours. Go to headquarters company, sign in, get a bunk, and then we'll see you on Monday morning." What?
Right.
You're not gonna, again, we
Yeah.
were really surprised. The weekend was there, just got orientated, as they said in the Army, and went around some of the different places, had breakfast, got caught up on sleep, and then Monday morning we had a formation and began training right then. That was
Interesting. That's
May 1967.
and how old were you then, John?
I was a grand total of 20,
20.
21.
Yeah. And what was to me that seems so exciting to enter Green Beret training was what were some sort of big things that you took away from that or memorable moments from that part of the training?
Well, again, is the very first thing is the men I met. Some of the guys who went through training group was we had at that time I think there were 3 companies at training group, Special Forces training. A company where I was, B company where my buddy Johnny McIntyre and a couple other guys were, and then C company. And then the guys in A company were like Spider Parks, Tony Harrell, Rick Estes, Rick Howard, guys that we began building literally lifetime friendships. And we trained together there. Rick Howard and Rick Estes and I, and Tony, we all went through commo training because with the special forces, you had um, different MOS. You have a medic, commo, demo, weapons,
Right.
intel, and then you
Interesting.
had an officer, an executive officer, so we all built around the concept of a 12-man A team, where you have a captain, and then a lieutenant. Back then, now they have warrant officers,
Okay.
and
I
then
see.
you have 2 men, 2 for intel. There'd be a senior and a junior, 2 medics, 2 commo, 2 demo, and 2 weapons. And that
Interesting.
A team worked together to train out wherever you sent. So my job was commo, and one of the things we carried away from it was our trainer was a guy named Sergeant First Class Paul Villarosa. He had 3 tours of duty already. Across his neck, he had a tattoo, cut here. And,
Interesting.
McIntyre and I, we really struggled. But he came in at night and worked with us. And then he worked with us on weekends. We
Really.
finally passed, got up to speed. We had to get Morse code at a
Yeah.
certain rate of a word group per minute. Anyway, we graduated. We had and then the very last phase was an FTX. So this is December. We're training to go to Vietnam. We jump into North Carolina, Uwharrie Forest, and the second day of the mission on the ground, we had a foot of snow. This is
Jeez.
just like, okay, this is classic Army training. We'll put you through a snowstorm to get you
Yeah.
ready for Southeast Asia.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Totally different climates.
Absolutely. And then we jumped in at night at 800 feet. So it's a very short jump. We had at least one broken back and 2 or 3 broken legs. You could hear guys in the trees
Oh
just
wow.
howling from pain.
Really?
And that was the beginning of our FTX. So we're out there trained up. We got done. We graduated. Here's your certificate. Don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out. And then the combo guys, we went down to Georgia for 12 more weeks, had a month leave. Then we reported at the end of April 68. So by that time, TET had been going on, had slowed down a lot, but there's still some residual extra contact going on from the TET offensive.
Right.
So we reported in country, get up to the Nha Trang, and that was the base for all special forces in Vietnam.
The train. Yeah.
And so we're there the first night. We got mortared, and the Indige barracks next to ours took 2 incoming.
Holy crow.
It killed several people, and when it exploded, the debris came over and just hit our roof and stuff. You could hear the guy screaming. So we all ran downstairs, go to the weapons room. It's locked.
Oh, geez.
So then we go out to the front line, and it was just the Viet Cong messing with us, just psyops, just dropping a couple mortar rounds in. Let you know there's a war going on.
And that was your first night that you were there.
Yeah.
Holy crow.
Welcome to Vietnam.
Yeah.
And then from there, we had in-country training. And Sergeant Villarosa and a few other of our trainers, at the end of our training cycles, we got to know these guys, particularly Villarosa. And so they all said, look, when you go to Vietnam, you guys are green, learn about the country, get on an A team, just take life easy. And he said, they're going to come out and ask for volunteers. Don't do it. Those guys are all dying. Okay, so we go to Vietnam, get the in-country training. At the end of it, the very last day, here comes a little guy. Hey, we're looking for volunteers. Johnny McIntyre goes, for what? They go, can't say. Either you're in or you're not. So we had just seen the movie, The Green Berets with John Wayne. What
Right.
would
Yeah.
the Duke do?
Yeah.
We did it. We all signed up for it. And the next
So-
thing we know, the next day we're up at Da Nang, we got the top secret briefing. So we went into this room with desk and everything, but all the windows are blacked out, and there was a black curtain up front. And the sergeant major comes in, and we've been students for over a year now. So the first thing, we're pulling our pads and pens out, and the sergeant major goes, put that shit away. This is a top secret briefing. In front of you is an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. Read it, sign it if you want to stay. If you don't want to stay, you can leave now. There's no hard feelings. Well, we all signed up. Welcome to the secret war. Yeah, then he, after we signed him, he turned around, pulled that black sheet or white sheet, whatever it was, he pulled it down, and there was a map of Southeast Asia. Here's Vietnam, I Corps up by the DMZ, 2 Corps, 3 Corps, 4 Corps. In Laos and Cambodia, there were target boxes. And then he went on to explain what the secret war was. And then from there, we all got dispatched. Myself, McIntyre, Rick Howard, Estes, we all went north to FOB 1, Phu Bai. And even there was like the little culture shock. We go to the Da Nang Air Base, and we get into the air base, and they go, there's your ride. And we had trained with all the American helicopters, Hueys, some of the older ones, some experimental aircraft, the Chinook. And they had, at that point, they had the HH-3, which was a bigger Sikorsky helicopter. Okay. We trained with all these. And in country, we trained with them. We trained a little bit with Spooky, the gunships that provided cover on the teams on the ground. But we had never seen an H-34 Sikorsky.
Interesting.
Owned by South Vietnamese. We're going, WTF?
Yeah.
Well,
with that,
nobody ever said anything. It was culture shock. And so, and the Sikorsky, you had a right door, and you got it as a passenger compartment. From there, you could look up and see the feet of the pilots. So they were higher in front of the aircraft. And when I got on, the door gunner, I could see the door gunner like talking something, but he's like smiling. So we get in. Oh, here's the other thing. They have a runway. So the F-4 jets are taking off. We go out there and wait for the jets to leave. Then they go out and turn on the runway, go down the runway because they had the struts with the wheels.
Right.
We go down, then we take off, just like the F-4s. It was too funny. So we're going down Highway 1, and it was just a beautiful ride, And so we're riding, here's Highway 1. We go past the Phu Bai airport. All of a sudden, we're literally on our side. They flip it on the side to do a turn. And all of a sudden, you're looking down at the road. Well, I seen that guy, that door gunner talking and laugh. I figured they're going to do something with the new guys,
Yeah, yeah.
So Johnny McIntyre and John Hutchins are going like, "Oh my God, we're going to fall out." Well, centrifugal force kept us in the helicopter. It was just that shock.
I can't imagine the heart attack that must have given
Oh
the guys.
yeah,
I would have been just absolutely terrified.
yeah. Because 1 second you're looking at the view, the next thing you're looking down a Highway 1 on our side as they're turning. Right?
Yeah,
It's like
yeah, for sure.
so. So then, but to get to a more serious side of this discussion, at that point, we get off the helicopter. A recon team gets on the helicopter with Spike Team Idaho. Glenn Lane was the team leader to 1-0. Robert Duval Owen was the assistant team leader, and some South Vietnamese. They get on a helicopter, go into a target, get inserted, and we walk back to the base. That's our first time on the base. So I go in base, and within 10 minutes, I run into Spider Parks.
Right,
And Spider was my pitcher on our Company A softball team. So I knew Spider from A Company,
right,
me,
right.
Tony. And so it was like, wow, this is wonderful to see a friendly face
Yeah,
in the base in the Secret War. And so he told us, yeah, the team's been inserted there. I used to be on a team, but I've been promoted. And he said, if you're interested, you can run recon with me on my new team. Fine. During the day, there was no more commo from the recon team. That team got wiped out. So this is today, being what, July 23, 2024, we still have 50 Green Berets that are still listed as missing in action from the secret war in Vietnam. They're amongst the 1,575 Americans that are still listed as MIA in Southeast Asia from the Vietnam War. But that's how serious that was that day. So that's my introduction. So Spider Parks because the team was wiped out, but he had been on Idaho. They made him the team leader. Don Wolcombe became the assistant. I was the radio operator, and we met some of the survivors. There are other Vietnamese on the team. The team would have anywhere from 7 to 9 or 10 indigenous troops. Well, Idaho was South Vietnamese. So we lost 3 or 4 Vietnamese that went down with the team. And then Sal, who was the Vietnamese counterpart, it was his rotation to miss that mission.
I see.
And
Yeah,
Hep was the interpreter. And thank the Lord, Hep was sick and he didn't
mm,
go. So
yeah,
we had Sal, the team leader, Spider, who had been on the team, and Hep, who was an outstanding interpreter. And we
mm,
rebuilt the team with Spider Parks. And I was
that
just really lucky. So we built the
man.
team, did a lot of training. We had the first couple of missions. We inserted the sensors in the Ashaw Valley and one up by Quezon, the base that had been in the historic siege earlier in '68. And then we had a couple other missions, but they're more like training missions. And
Interesting.
of
Yeah,
course, we always did night ambushes and stuff outside the base, but they didn't really count as a mission. And so after that, Spider Parks got promoted to a covey rider, and we had FACS, a forward air controller, and our code name was Covey.
right.
And so you have an Air Force pilot, would be an O2 little Cessna, little push pull Cessna,
Yeah,
Air Force pilot, but we had a Covey rider, and that would be one of the experienced Green Berets who had been on the ground, so that when they made radio contact with a team on the ground, they were familiar with the language, the situation, what it was like to be on the ground, and they could literally calm people down if they got
interesting.
suicide on the radio to help them survive.
Yeah,
So Sparta got promoted. Don became the 1-0, and then we had our first mission uh, was Target Echo 4, and that was October 6th, 1968. The day previous, Lynn Black was with Spike Team Alabama. 9-man team went into a target. They ran into 10,000 NVA that day.
jeez. Yeah.
And we lost 3 team members that day. The team leader was inexperienced. Literally walked into an L-shaped ambush. So he was killed. The point man was killed instantly. and they were in a firefight all day. And years later, Lynn Black talked to the North Vietnamese Army officer who had ambushed him.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, yeah. And so Lynn
Wow.
said, that was a bad day. We lost 3 people. And then the commander goes, well, it was a bad day for us. You and the TAC Air inflicted 90% casualties on us.
Holy crow.
And Lynn goes, we saw it was a battalion. We thought it was 3,000 men. He goes, no, it was a division base camp that you came into.
Wow.
And we had 10,000 men.
Holy crow.
And between TAC Air and the recon team, at one point, they had killed so many, they were stacking up the dead bodies. When they ran out of ammo, they picked up the enemy weapons and used them against the enemy. That
Man.
firefight went on all day. We're listening to this. 5th, on first light on October 6th, we're up, get on a helicopter, and we inserted into a target Echo 4.
Wow. Holy
We were
crow.
on the ground for a day. We got overrun by monkeys.
Yeah, that's how I read that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I think this is the chapter you're talking about, right?
Yeah, I was just thinking, just if we could just take just a step back. Like one of the things that, like, I was going to mention that really impressed me with your story was, and you just touched on it briefly, is the incredible individuals that you came across, like guys like Spider Parks, Captain Tin. It just seemed like you were surrounded by amazing people. Is that like a fair assumption? Like, I
Oh,
mean, Lynn Black, these guys just sound unbelievable to me. And this, like, I can't say it enough to people that, are, interested, is like, try to read these books, have a listen to the stories, because we're really only going to just touch a tiny little bit of what you and your teammates went through. But guys like that just sound like incredible individuals. Captain Tin, the
oh,
pilot that you had coming, the level of bravery, it's unbelievable, really. Like,
yeah, because we briefly touched on the South Vietnamese Air Force,
yeah,
and so for us, not being trained, nobody told us about it. And you jump on it, that culture shock, like, oh wait, our lives are now in the hands of our allies.
right.
Well,
Yeah.
again, this is a major blessing because those pilots were absolutely fearless.
Yes. Yeah.
And over time, they saved our recon team. Not only would they put us in, but they came back and pulled us out.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Under
Captain
heavy
Tin,
fire.
yeah, on August the 3rd, we had a recon team that got overrun 3 times. The last time they got overrun, the team leader called in an A1 Sky Raider gun run on his own team to break the enemy attack.
Jeez.
And so during the gun run, it killed one of the South Vietnamese team members, and there were two 20 Mike rounds that hit Tom Cunningham, who was the radio operator. One round hit his radio, exploded the shrapnel, wounding the team leader. The second round hit his leg and threw him into the air. And Tom had this out of body experience where he saw his leg dangling as he
Oh,
flew
man.
through the air.
Wow.
When he landed, he wasn't sure if he was alive or not. Then he called out his name and then he returned to his body. Now, John Walton was the team medic. He saved Tom. There was a South Vietnamese that got shot 4 times. He saved him. And so when it was time for the extraction, Captain Tin came in, picked up Cunningham, the team leader, who was wounded, because August the 3rd was high elevation.
Right.
He could only take 3 men. So he left, and it was John Walton on the ground, and John Walton was the son of Sam Walton from later on Walmart fame.
Oh, I
He was a
see.
Green Beret medic. He's an outstanding medic.
Interesting.
And 2 other teams came in and got shot out. I mean, King Bees came in and got shot out. Tin came back, landed, picked up John and the other team member. The dead soldier they left behind because they didn't want to wait.
Right.
And so he could barely he took off, but he couldn't get enough transitional lift to leave. He just had enough lift to get over the helicopters. He dipped down into the valley and circled around, getting enough momentum, then flew back to base.
Wow.
So
Just
this is
elite
Captain
level,
Tim. Oh, that's
in,
amazing.
incredible
So
pilots.
right. So on October 7th, we got into a firefight at 2 o'clock, and we went 2 hours without any TAC air. They kept coming at us. We're stacking up their bodies. and we finally got TAC air in, directed the strikes, napalm runs, gunships, fast movers, and the first time we used napalm where I could literally smell human flesh burning from the
Oh
napalm.
man, jeez.
At last light, Captain Tin came back and hovered, and Spider Parks was flying covey. He found an LZ that we could go to, but it was about maybe 10, 15 yards away with elephant grass.
Right.
The elephant grass is anywhere from 8 to 12 feet tall.
Yeah.
It's hard to get through. It took us 10 minutes to get to the helicopter. We finally
Jeez,
threw the team on. We lifted off, and he pulled us out. I was down to my last magazine and my last hand grenade when we left.
man.
So we're in
It's
last light, flying back to Fubai, and we flew south for a minute. It was the most beautiful sunset we had ever seen.
yeah.
You know, and again, the jungle was lighting up with all these little red lights and green tracers, all coming up to try to shoot us down. But Captain Tin saved us, saved our whole team that day. The same Captain Tin from August 3rd, and he flew us back to Fubai. He said, Captain, come in. I want to buy you a drink. He says, no, my wife is waiting for me to come home for dinner.
Yeah.
So he flew home to see his wife and kids.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's remarkable the level of coolness that would take. I can't even imagine how calm he is, and even just like when I read your stories, like all of you in terms of having being able to make decisions, operate effectively, and like one of the things that, like, okay, just to take a step back, so you're part of MACV-SOG. Can you just describe a little bit about what your role and the organization's role was, and why you were getting inserted into on that mission?
Oh, sure. In the early part of the Vietnam War, in the very early 60s, the CIA was doing some operations across the border. But but because of the Bay of Pigs and some other incidents, President Kennedy, was upset with the CIA, and he ordered them to end any involvements in Laos and Cambodia. So America agreed to pull back, and we had some Green Berets that were over there, Operation White Star, where it had Green Berets in Laos, and there was another operation in Cambodia with some of our people. They were all withdrawn.
Right.
And so there was an agreement that neither we nor the communists from North Vietnam would have any, quote, combat troops in Laos or Cambodia. Well, by the time I get there in 68, in Laos, they had 25 to 30,000 people, NVA soldiers, that were coming down the Ho Chi Minh Trail, bringing supplies into South Vietnam. Cambodia had anywhere from 50 to 100,000 NVA. Now, that's okay, but they lied. But this is this whole PR thing.
Right.
So we had the Top Secret War from 1964 until 1972, which was designed to go run missions across the fence to learn what the enemy was doing. They have area recon, point recon, specific targets. Like by 68, the NVA were running fuel lines down from North Vietnam into Laos. And that way they bring more fuel, be less trucks, less targets for the Air Force. But we learned about the pipelines, so we would be a mission, we would blow them up. We did wiretaps, we did bomb damage assessments. So there would be an arc light, and the arc light would be a B-52 strike on a target, an enemy target in Laos or North Vietnam, and then we would go in and then have to assess the damage.
Interesting.
And
On
they
the
turned out
ground.
to be a pretty dangerous mission because the Air Force said, "Oh, when we drop the bombs from an arc light, everybody will be dead." No, no. There were some pretty pissed off NVA.
Yeah.
So
Right.
we had teams that had major um, confrontations with the enemy on that, but that's one of our missions. We also did wiretaps, and of course, the POW snatch was a key because anytime you get a live prisoner, I mean, we would get a bonus of $100 and we get a 5-day R&R anywhere in the world. So that was for us. But
if you
from an
brought someone back.
operational perspective, nothing better for intel than from a prisoner.
Right.
So we had trained hard, long and hard, to try to capture a prisoner, and they usually weren't very happy about cooperating.
No, no,
So
yeah. So
that's why we
MACV-SOG,
had the secret war.
and it stands for Military Assistance Command Vietnam Studies and Observation Group, and
Right.
that's why, like, my understanding is you had to sign that NDA that you were chatting or talking about earlier, because you were doing, like, I guess you call them black ops
Oh
in
yeah.
Laos and Cambodia. Is it my understanding that you actually never did a mission in Vietnam? Were they all across the fence, so to speak?
All my missions were across the fence. Yeah, we
Yeah.
had a couple of training targets in country, and we put in some Air Force sensors that were right on the border. And there's no signs that said "Welcome to Laos."
Yeah.
You had this jungle thing, so it was like an approximate border.
Right,
We put
right.
in some of the Air Force sensors, and we had minimal contact when we did that because
When you
the NVA and the Viet Cong, they would only fight when they wanted to fight, and
Interesting.
so. But because we had that agreement from 1963, from those accords, technically our U.S. government needed plausible deniability, meaning if I get killed, I can have nothing on me to indicate I'm an American. No dog
Interesting.
tags, no photographs, no names, no correspondence from mom or girlfriends or anything like that. And that way, if we got picked up or killed, they would say, well, we got this Caucasian body. They knew we were Americans. We knew the North Vietnamese were there, but they lied publicly, saying that they weren't there. And so that was part of that subterranean battle
Yeah.
underneath the jungle triple canopy. And then as late as September of 69, there's a tape with President Nixon saying, we have no combat troops stationed in Laos. That's true. We weren't stationed. We flew in by helicopter.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It flew in and flew out.
And as it turned out, we had one of the highest casualty rates of the war because the NVA, by 68, they were training up sappers. And those sappers were highly trained if a recon team got on the ground, their mission was to find us, to track us, and then to come into our perimeter close and kill the Americans, but leave the indigenous troops alive for psyops. And up north, we lost a team on January 1st of 69. November of 69, we had another team got wiped out. And again, they killed all the Americans, left the indigenous alive for psyops.
Man, that must have been really hard psychologically for you to, like, if they're leaving the indigenous South Vietnamese alive but only killing American soldiers. I can't imagine what that would do to the teams. Was
Oh
that a
yeah,
pretty big
and then
impact?
there would be people in camp that hadn't worked like with the South Vietnamese like we had. So by
Right.
January 69, I'd been on that team for 6 months. I knew them. We had
Yeah.
been through these several missions together, and I was alive in January thanks to them and the King B pilots and TAC Air that we used whenever we made contact with the enemy, including the A-1 Sky Raiders.
It
So
it
yeah, we were just very fortunate to be alive at that point. And and my team, I just told Hep and Sal, look, if you hear anything negative, you come to me right away and we'll deal with it. Or if you get an intel report about anybody that could be a VC or NVA, again, let me know. And they go, we'll take care of the communists. Okay,
well,
very
your
good.
South Vietnamese teammates just sounded incredible in terms of, like I remember distinctly in a few of the missions, Sal just having almost a sixth sense of when North Vietnamese soldiers were close or Viet Cong soldiers were close. Is that something that kind of blew you away? Because it seemed like almost like he kind of knew ahead of the rest of the team. Is that true? Or
Oh, absolutely true. Because Sal, by the time I get there in 68, Hep and Sal have been running missions for at least 2+ years across the fence with Idaho. and they were fortunate not to be on the teams that got wiped out, because Idaho got wiped out twice, early on in the war, and then in May of '68. And by the grace of the Lord, Hep and Sal had missed that mission, and so we rebuilt the team around them. So yeah, I never worried about it. When we were in the field, man, it was us versus the communists, and we had three guys on our team, at least three, uh, Quang, Sun, and Tuan. In 1954, after Dien Bien Phu fell, that was a French base. The North Vietnamese defeated them. The final defeat. France formally left Vietnam. And there was a period of 18 months where anybody in North Vietnam could go south. Anybody in the south could go north above the DMZ.
Okay.
Nobody went north.
Right. Okay.
Hundreds of thousands of people came south, including
Interesting.
spies. But my guys, they came down with their families. Several of the Kingpee pilots came down with their families, because nobody, they knew, like my little people, my South Vietnamese knew that their government in South Vietnam was corrupt, no question. But there was an entity that they knew and were familiar with. They preferred that, and they were willing to die for that corruption, even with the corruption in place, before being under the thumb of communism.
Interesting. Yeah.
Oh,
They
absolutely. And
they
there's no
sounded
doubt. I mean,
like
they put their lives on the line every day
yeah.
going out.
The level of bravery, again, I come back to it when we like when I first started listening to the podcast on Jocko's that you were on. I came back and I words couldn't describe the things that you'd gone through, and I shared it with my crew. And again, just everyone was just blown away by the stories and the things that you went through. One of the things that I wanted to chat about was, okay, so when you came from the main base and you went to FOB 1, or Forward Operating Base 1,
No.
you met Spider Parks. You went. One of the things that was interesting is you talked about a couple of poker games that went awry, and the reason I wanted to chat about that was just to get a feel for what it must have been like as a young guy, Green Beret, showing up there. And you talked about that you learned very quickly to never go weaponless anywhere. And it really struck me, because I just trying to put myself in your shoes. I just like, holy man, I would just be on pins and needles just in the operating base. Like, is that true? Or
Oh, well, yeah, it's a lesson that Johnny McIntyre and I learned. Within the first 3 or 4 days, we were at Fubai at FOB 1. One of the things that Special Forces, the Green Berets, did that separates us from any other unit, we work with the indigenous people of the country, one fashion or another. So our aspect here was to run top secret missions across the fence. So in our same base camp, we had Montagnards, we had Chinese, Nungs, who were basically from Saigon area, who were Chinese, but they grew up in South Vietnam, and they were very patriotic. They're fearless fighters, just amazing men. You had the regular South Vietnamese, and then you had Cambodians sometimes. Now, the Montagnards hated the Vietnamese, and reciprocal. So you never mixed them on a team. You had a Montagnard team, Cambodian team,
oh,
Nung team,
interesting.
or Vietnamese like my team. But you never brought them in to mix them up. Well, in the first couple of days, and I forget which indigenous cheated, but there's a poker game and with the indigenous troops, and the one guy lost. He went and got a hand grenade. I think he was Cambodian. He came back and threw a hand grenade into the Montagnards that had just taken his money. Well, all of a sudden, the base camp erupts. We hear all this shooting, and then some of the team members, the indigenous troops, are running around with their M16s, and one of the guys who I'd just been introduced to on my team came around the corner and put his M16 right in my face.
Jeez, holy
And
mackerel.
McIntyre and I are like, I gently picked up the M16 and said, "Don't do that," and we calmed him down. But the special forces guy went in. Each one got their team, passed up the wounded. We had to go through the ceremony to. Now I didn't do this personally, but there were at least 2 or 3 casualties. I mean, meaning killed by the hand grenade.
Wow.
So they had to settle all that down and work with it. So that's the poker game that went awry.
Yeah, it's just what a place to be with that. Like so many different ethnic people with ethnic backgrounds, and is that when you also you kind of I remember you saying like that was like the last time you didn't walk anywhere unarmed,
Oh yeah.
like yeah. It's just not worth it. And so in FOB1, you had a few things like so it's set up with like your commanding officer and XO, and then you have different areas like S1, S2, S3. That those are those basically like branches of that base.
It's a typical military. Every base will have an S1 for personnel matters, awards and decorations. S2 is intelligence. S3 is operations. S4 is supply.
Okay.
And so with the Secret War, we had our own private organization that was in Okinawa that gave us our rations, uniforms, weapons. We had all kinds of different experimental weapons that we tried out
Yeah.
during the time, different uniforms, tiger stripes, plain jungle fatigues, and so that would all be a part of it. And then after mission, you go to S4, get renewed ammo, get new magazines for any of the ones you lost in the firefight, and take it from there.
And then your teams. So we touched on it briefly. There's Hatchet Force and Spike teams, and can we just talk about kind of how they were like the different sort of or like
Sure.
how those were
Yeah.
set up?
In '68, the code name for a spike team, a recon team, was a spike team. So it'd be ST Idaho. And we had, at FOB1, the recon teams were named after states. We had Idaho, Alabama, um, Alaska, North Carolina, Connecticut. And then that would be 2 or 3 Americans with 6 to maybe 9 or 10 indigenous troops. And that we would all train together.
I see.
Then for a mission, the Americans, and after I became a team leader, after Echo 4, I became the 1-0, the team leader for Idaho. I got to the point where I'd like to have just me and another American because the South Vietnamese were so good.
Just so yeah, so effective and
Yeah,
so
so
capable.
I wanted another American. So if I got shot, he could carry my dumb ass out. If he
Right.
got shot, I could get him out. Because we're just bigger physically than our Vietnamese counterparts.
Yeah.
And that would be a spike team. Later in '69, they began to call them recon teams
I
for the
see.
rest of the
I see.
war. Hatchet Force was a larger size operation. And the classic example was in September of 1970, we had Operation Tailwind, had 16 Green Berets from a B company at Khartoum with 120 indigenous troops that went in to relieve a CIA operation that was further west of our area of operations. They went out there, they're on the ground for 4 days. They had, at the end, the 16 Green Berets on that mission received 32 Purple Hearts.
Holy crow.
And they had over 50% of the indigenous troops and all the Americans were wounded, various degrees of wounds. Had one medic,
Jeez.
Gary Mike Rose, who was awarded the Medal of Honor at the White House by President Trump in October 23, 2017.
Mm.
Just an amazing day to be in the White House. We went down with Mike when he got his award.
Oh
And it's
wow.
from that mission. So Hatchet Force could be a platoon or even maybe just a couple of squads sometimes, but usually be a platoon
Okay.
or a company. And they would go out for bigger operations if a team was in trouble. Sometimes they send a Hatchet Force. Sometimes they would they would block the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Block it, then the traffic would get backed up. And the Air Force would come in and just blow all the trucks to smithereens.
Oh, interesting. They kind of bottleneck it, so to speak, or
It
shut it
worked
down.
really well for a day or two. And then the NVA would come in with artillery, mortars, and it would be a pitched battle.
They would
So
adapt to
Operation
that.
Tailwind in '70 the team leader knew the history. So he went in, he kept moving every day, every night. They moved for 4 days. They destroyed 2 enemy caches, got a ton of intelligence out, to help to save the CIA operation. So it was a complete success. But like I said, they had an extreme amount of casualties. And Mike was the only medic on that team. Even Mike and the team leader was wounded on the first night of the mission from shrapnel from an RPG, but they
Oh
drove
man.
on.
And your team, you touched on it briefly there. So you have designations like 1110, and what can you just describe those real quickly?
Oh yeah, the 1-0 is the team leader. That's the man with the most experience, and then the 1-1 would be the assistant team leader. The 1-2 would be technically the radio operator, but in my case, I always carried the radio. I wanted to be in control, particularly when we got TAC air going. We had a couple of cases of younger people or somebody making a mistake with TAC air, and a mistake like that can be a fatal mistake. So we didn't want to take any chances. I always did the TAC air myself. Um, and then our counterparts, the 0-1 would be our Vietnamese team leader, who was Sal. 0-2
Oh, okay.
was the interpreter, and then of course we had a grenadier. I thought it was a 0-9, 0-3, whatever it was, but the 0 first would be for our Vietnamese counterparts. So each team member had their own number, and so if something happened with a casualty or something, we would know who had been wounded, whatever it was.
Yeah, I see. And we didn't talk about it yet, but your nickname is Tilt. And I know that that was something that in the book they talk about giving out nicknames, but you'd already had that nickname, I think, if I'm not mistaken,
Right? Yeah,
beforehand.
we grew up playing pinball machines, so I got that name early on. It kind of stuck. I wasn't
Yeah.
very good at it. In fact, years ago, my 5-year-old daughter defeated me in a game of pinballs. She could barely touch the flippers, but Meredith was able to get out there, hit the flippers, and she beat her dad in a pinball game.
Uh, that's awesome. Okay, so and now one of the things that I want to talk about, like I want to go back to the mission that you brought up, of course, and just chat a little bit more about that. But what's fascinating to me, and like the reason I find it also fascinating about your training is when we talk about your loadout, like when I go like, hiking or hunting or everything, I way overpack. Like it's like, you would laugh at me, like the stuff I bring. It's basically like, bringing an apartment with me for comfort. And when I looked at your loadout and you talked about it with Jocko, it was like, holy smokes. Like it really, to me, defines the mission, the danger you guys were in, the things like what you were preparing for. Would you be able to just chat about what you generally carried in when you went on your missions?
Yeah, particularly after Echo 4, a mission from October 6 and 7 of 68, the emphasis was always on firepower. So I always carried more than 600 rounds for my Car 15. That Car 15 is a modified version of the M60. It had a collapsible stock and it had a shorter barrel to it. So it's much more flexible, easy to move in the jungle with that. And then we always had 600 plus rounds, and we only had 20-round magazines then. And they were told that only put 18 rounds in each magazine because the springs, sometimes if they would overload, they may not feed properly. So in the middle of a firefight, you don't want magazine failure. So we always carried a few extras for good luck. But 600, we carried a sawed-off M79 grenade launcher, and it fired a 40 millimeter round. And we always carried HE, had one round for gas, and then another round for smoke, or CS, like tear gas.
Tear
So
gas,
if
right?
you
Okay.
made, if you're in contact and things are just going to shit, we'd fire off the CS, and that we always carried gas masks,
I see.
and the CS would disorient people enough, hoping to break contact and for survival purposes. And then sometimes we would carry a 22 with a silencer on it,
Hmm.
and but those were our primary weapons: the Car 15, the M79, and then 10 to 12 hand grenades. I carried a radio with a battery for it, plus smoke grenades. when directing TAC air, you had to pop smoke so they could direct the TAC air off the smoke. And then other personal things, everything from LURPs, which were dehydrated rations, and a mirror, pin flares, map, notebook, pens, things like that. And then cravats, tourniquets, in case you needed them for something like that. And then a sweater. At night, the jungle could be chilly. Again, you're used to 100 degrees temperature, so it gets down to 80s at night with a
Yeah.
sweater on,
Yeah.
And
That
then
should
they
get
had
all
a little short rain jacket that covered your shoulders, had a hood, went down to your waist, and when you're on the ground and it's raining, if you weren't careful, the rain would come down your back and go right into your pants.
Man, that just sums it up incredibly. Like what you're going in and carrying. Nothing like no sleeping bag, no comfort.
No,
Did you carry much in the way of water, or was it just a little bit?
it
Or
would depend on the area of operations. Like in layouts, we would do a VR, get a map study. Depending on the time of year, if there was water in the streams, then we'd carry less canteens.
I see,
And we always carried the purification pills.
like iodine or something, or iodine
Correct.
pill, or yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So on our first couple of missions, we always come to a stream, and even at a stream, would be extra caution because we knew others would want water there. So
Mm,
one person at a time would go down, fill their canteen up, pop the pills. Because anyway, anything we could do to lighten the weight factor, we would do it.
yeah, yeah. How much did that all weigh? Do you recall?
One time I put it on a scale, like a rinky-dink scale.
Yeah.
It was over 80 pounds.
Jeez.
And I'm not
Holy
sure how
crow.
accurate that is. It could be off 5
Yeah.
or 10 pounds one way or the other.
Yeah, that's a huge and then one of the things that also struck me is you did an extensive amount of training with, I believe it was Spider Parks, but it could be wrong, but the team trained a lot with hip firing that car 15. Is that correct?
Oh,
Like,
sure. Yeah,
yeah,
and because a lot of times we made contact, we didn't have time to come up too short. If you're firing from your hip, you just turn around and open fire. Whereas if you have it hip on your hip, by the time you come up to your shoulder and aim, you could be dead. So we trained extensively that way, and the few times that I actually uh, had the time to extend the stock, get the weapon to my shoulder, and aim it at a particular target was rare. So rare that you can remember it a couple of times. Because a lot of times we're
fascinating.
just firing from the hip
Yeah,
or loose because we're on the ground and then trying to shoot. So different angles.
it's interesting because obviously being a civilian, not really knowing, watching movies, it's sort of like you just have no idea. But that's just such a critical point that like time matters so quickly when you engage.
Absolutely.
And one of the things too that you chat about in the book was, and we'll get into it a little bit more, is that when you would get into an engagement and there'd be huge gunfire, there'd sometimes be a moment of silence where everyone's reloading, and whoever could kind of reload quickest seemed to, that was who obviously came out with the advantage. And it sounded like Sal and like some of the South Vietnamese were incredible at that. Is that true? Or
Oh, that's a cold fact. I mean, we
yeah,
trained. We had so many days, months, and weeks on the range. We even in between missions. Sometimes we go down there and just to run through the immediate action drills over and over again, just so you kept on top of your speed, so you knew where your magazines were, and then you do the drill like you peel back. Somebody's always firing at the enemy, and
interesting.
on the other hand, if you, with our people, our little people, we never got ambushed because they were so cautious. And we were in the
Right.
jungle. We didn't cross jungle. I mean, we didn't walk on trails. We would cross a trail and try to leave no evidence that we had crossed it. And don't forget for your people like yourself that may not be familiar with a Car 15, you fired 20 rounds in a second and a half.
Jeez. Wow. Yeah.
And that's all. And of course, the weapon would tend to rise a little. So you had to ride
Right.
that weapon down, but that's part of the training. And that's what you're talking. The answer to your question, yes, there was a couple times when after that initial engagement, it was this moment of silence where all you could hear were people dropping their empty magazines and slamming in the new ones. So when the firefight's going on, time expands. So like a second is broken down into many parts of a second.
Right.
And when that silence happened, it always felt like a very expanded time. It's kind of like, holy shit, look how quiet it is. When in reality, it's just a matter of a second and a half or so while everybody's dropping and reloading. And yes, our team, our South Vietnamese, we always won that battle because,
Wow.
and here's a part of that too. Of course, the NVA had 30 round magazines. We had
Right.
20. And we had one of our guys, Dale Hansen. He ran a mission out of Khartoum. His initial contact, he came up against 3 NVA. He killed the first 2 and ran out of bullets. The third guy shot him and shot off one of his fingers in the middle of the firefight.
Oh, jeez.
Dale stayed in and ran the mission, completed the mission over 4 days or 4 or 5 days. Oh, yeah.
Just
Dale
incredibly
Hansen. His
tough.
book is great, by the way.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'll check that out for sure.
Oh, Dale Hansen, he's just a great guy too. So, but that's
just
the kind of situation you're up against. And to answer your question, it
yeah.
happened. It was weird, but again, when you're going on full automatic, I used to call it an apocalyptic death war because you just fire 22, one round. You hear how loud it is,
Yeah.
and then you fire. You got 6 men firing CAR-15s or M79s, and the enemy firing their AK-47s or
Man.
SKS at us on full automatic. It's insane.
Yeah, it just must be just loud, deafening, smell of gunfire, imagining everything else going on, and just it's incredible that you guys how you did, how you operated, and were able to keep things together and get through your missions. Just to paint a picture, like I obviously want to really chat about that mission we were chatting about earlier, but just to paint a picture going back for the listeners or viewers. So you had your Cubby Rider up top, which sometimes it was like Spider Parks, and he's in a Cessna. He'd be your air sort of coordinator. He's coordinating like the King Bees coming back in. He's coordinating the A1 Skyhawks and then F4
Vibrators, yeah.
Phantoms. Yeah, and then you're on the ground and basically doing your mission. Now, before when you got inserted, the whole idea was to you you didn't want to be discovered, so to speak. And when that did happen, then that is that generally when this mission is compromised and we need extraction. Is that kind of
Right.
accurate?
And so we made enemy contact. Once we made enemy contact, then we get on the radio to try to get some kind of air coverage. And sometimes in Laos, because of the mountains, it might take anywhere from 2 to 4 or 5 hours. And we had teams that were in enemy contact before getting hold of anybody. So while we're in the middle of a firefight, once we made radio contact, like in Echo 4, we made contact with a fighter pilot who contacted Covey, who
I see.
eventually came out over our station. Well, we're in triple canopy. So the first thing I've got to do is to make a visual contact with him, direct him into where we are, or by
Yeah.
mirror or by smoke. So on that day, there was a spot in the jungle when he went by, I could hit him with a flashing so he could see my mirror and
Right.
then come in. Then when we direct attack air, we would pop the smoke and run and then operate all the tactical gun runs, things like that, off the smoke. But you had to get all that coordinated first. So then I would talk to Spider. He would say, okay, we got an A1 Sky Raider. They're coming in with a napalm run or 500-pound bombs, the fast movers,
Yeah.
whatever. And then we had the helicopter gunships. We had the judge and the executioner
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the muskets. And they came right down to nap of the earth when they made their gun runs. Just phenomenal. And then our A1 Sky Raiders. They were a plane developed at the end of World War II. They flew during the Korean War, and they were designed for close air support. And they could stay on station for 2 or 3 hours.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
they
Yeah.
carried the same amount of weight in ordnance that a B-17 could carry.
Oh wow, really? I didn't know
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Holy cool.
Incredible
Interesting.
ordnance. So they have everything from bombs, napalm, cluster bomb units, machine guns, miniguns, 20 Mike, 40 Mike, depending on
Wow.
what each plane was set up to have for ordnance.
Interesting.
We
Interesting.
love the
And
stats. Oh, yeah.
and just for people like listening, one of the things that struck me also is like you have to remember there's no GPS at this time. There's no cell phones or night vision. You guys are operating on it's incredible what you operated on and coordinated with just very like nothing compared to what we have today. Is
On
that
the
pretty
line of
accurate?
sight, you got to confirm where we are. And then
Yeah.
the NVA sometimes would even, they often monitor our frequency. So if Covey Spider would say pop a smoke, he wouldn't say pop a yellow smoke. He'd say pop a smoke. And so, cause we had teams that said, okay, I'm going to pop a yellow smoke. Well, the Covey rider would see 2 or 3 yellow smokes pop up. Which
Oh
one is
yeah.
yours? So
Okay.
when he would say pop a smoke, I would pop it. Then he'd say, okay, I see a violet smoke or a yellow or white smoke. Is that you?
I
Because
see.
sometimes with Lynn Black on that one day of their mission, they did that. He said pop a smoke. They popped it, and the NVA guessed and popped the
Mm.
same color. A helicopter came in and they shot it down.
Oh geez. Okay.
Oh
I see.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
deadly game.
Yeah. And like you said, dense jungle. So like
Triple
in
canopy
miles of
could
it.
go up to 150 feet in the air.
Man.
3 separate layers of jungle growth.
Wow. Yeah, just incredible. And so going back to that mission that we were talking about earlier, when you went in on that mission, who all was on the team that day?
Don Walton was the team leader. He was the 1-0. I was the 1-1. And Jim Davison was a new member of the team. He had come in from the 173rd Airborne, volunteered to serve with us. Hep, Sal, and Fook. Fook ran
Right.
point for the entire time, and we were on the ground together with them. Just move 10 minutes, wait 10 minutes to listen to the jungle, because the jungle had its own life cycle of rhythm. And when we stopped moving, usually within 5 or 10 minutes, the regular noise and the animals, the monkeys, insect noises would all come back. Didn't
Yeah,
come back. That meant something else was going on.
I
We
see.
just assumed the worst, that would be the NVA.
Yeah, that they were maybe close and because the jungle wasn't getting noisy again from the creatures that were in there.
Right.
Um, on that one, was it true that you guys were looking to blow up fuel lines on that one?
No, that was the primary was just an area reconnaissance.
Okay,
And then they told us about an American POW camp. We had a report of a POW camp. So Don and I wanted to go to that, to find that camp, to see if we could find it, A, B, somehow do a tactical operation to try to get the American prisoners out. But we made contact on day 2, so we could not go forward with the mission. We were compromised. Then you go from mission to survival.
right. And you was that one the one where you going back to the elephant grass? Was that the one where you guys inserted into deep elephant grass? And because what I found interesting with that is that, like you're saying earlier, it could be like 10, 12 feet tall. So the chopper comes in and you go to exit and you don't even know what footing you have. Is that correct? Or is that a different mission?
No, that was Christmas Day. But
Right.
what you had to do was the prop wash would generally blow it down, but you had to make sure you could see the ground, because the helicopter pilots and the crews, they would tell us jump. They didn't care if we were 10 or 12 feet in the air. They
Yeah.
wanted us to get the hell off the aircraft so they could get back to base
Sure.
and
Yeah.
not be hanging over as a possible target. So, and we had cases of a lieutenant that broke his ankle, other people that got hurt jumping out too soon.
I see.
So Sparta told us, and we trained up so we could see that ground. So when it pushed it down, it was clear enough that we only had a couple of feet to go. We jumped out, hit the ground, got on with the mission.
I got you. Yeah. 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 So you made it through this one. Was that the one that you're talking about before too? That when you're going through, you're doing your 10-minute on, 10-minute off, and is that when you did come across the monkeys?
Yeah, our very
Yeah.
first mission. Yeah, we could hear them coming. So the team got online. We pulled the pins out of hand grenades, had the Car 15 on full automatic, and then over the top of us came a herd or a flock of monkeys. What do you call a group of monkeys?
I don't know what they're.
They were
Yeah,
going somewhere in a hurry, and they were
yeah,
squawking and squeaking, going over us, making all the noise, and went their way. And so I don't even know what spooked them.
man,
But yeah, they
wild.
went their way, and we continued on our way. And then, of course, earlier we'd been on the ground maybe an hour and a half, and Fook got stung by bees. Fook
Oh,
and Don Walken got hit by bees.
that's right. Yeah, yeah,
Ugh.
and yeah, and when you were doing that one, sorry, I'm just going to kind of just make sure I'm on top of it. You'd heard, I believe, if not mistaken, you'd heard a shot behind you guys. Is
Right.
that
Well,
correct? From
the enemy would once they knew a team was in the jungle, they would try to find us, and they had a way of signaling each other with their rifles. And sometimes they have tracker dogs. And on that occasion, we heard some signal shots in the afternoon, and it kept getting closer as we were moving. We never knew. We couldn't figure out what actually happened. But by the time we set up our RON at night to rest overnight, there was one of the trackers was maybe 20, 30 feet in front of one of our perimeters and fired around.
mm,
So it was close,
yeah, yeah,
but we
crazy.
never had contact. So at first light in the morning, before first light, the whole team was awake. We had claymore mines out so that if they hit us, we'd be ready. They
Yeah,
didn't hit us. We moved,
yeah.
and then about 2 o'clock, we got on top of a knoll, and then they came after us. And the knoll was small enough that they could only put so many people up at one time. So they would come up this jungle, this little hill, come at us, and we just blow them back in the jungle.
I remember in the book and talking about that mission, that was a kind of a very advantageous position for you guys because you had a ton of NVA coming up towards that knoll by that point. Is that correct? Or
Oh yeah, they kept coming, and a lot of times you would see the weapon or hear the gunfire. You wouldn't see an NVA come out of the jungle and rush us
mm,
because we could hear them between
I
the
see.
weapons and the noise, and this whole front would just that's the way it opened up, and the hill had the little slope, so some were coming up, some would be directly, some would be on the side. Because at one point, I was shooting at people in the jungle, and Fook opened fire, and I thought he was shooting with me. But when we debriefed, because it really hurt my hearing, I'm the radio guy, supposed to try to listen to Spider, and and so I said, "Hey, why were you shooting over my shoulder?" He goes, "No, you dumbass. The NVA were coming up the hill to get ready to kill you, and I killed them."
Oh man. And yeah, so when you guys woke up in the morning, I think one part that had happened was that you were continuing your patrol, and then I think it was yourself or Sal saw two NBA soldiers standing and kind of laughing or grinning at you guys. Is that correct?
Well, that was part of that mission where at one point about noon, about 1 o'clock or so, we came out of the jungle because it was so steep and there was an animal path.
I see.
So we got on the animal path and we were going up the side of this mountain to get to the top because we wanted to get over the mountain to get down to go towards that area where the POW camp was that they held Americans. So the trail went around, we went up, and then it kind of twisted to the left and then it bent. Well, Fook and then Walken went around that, and Sal was the tail gunner, and I was number 5 in the march of order, and I hear Sal hissing, and I turned
Mm,
around, and he pointed way back down that trail. There were two NVA just standing there, port arms, tall. They may have been
man.
Chinese,
Yeah.
and they were smiling. So they didn't point their AKs at us. They were just standing there. So I told Don that, and then Don got around the corner. Then we went up to that, and we found that little knoll.
That knoll, and
And
that's when they were pursuing you up that path then.
that's when they hit us.
And you, so one thing that I had to kind of figure out a little bit is that the area that you operated in, the operational area, is called Prairie Fire. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a code name.
Yeah,
We had
yeah, that,
North Vietnam code name was Nickel Steel. Laos was Prairie Fire, and then Cambodia was during by '68 it was Daniel Boone, and then it became a Salem House.
and that's what led to like that's where the term now, because you guys are compromised with these MVA soldiers coming up, you're trying to get a hold of Covey and or Spider Parks, and that's when now it becomes classified as a Prairie Fire emergency.
Correct. So when a team made contact, the mission's compromised. If we declared a Prairie Fire emergency, any TAC air in the air within a distance over Southeast Asia could be directed to our location
I
to
see.
support a recon team or a Hatchet Force.
Right. Okay.
So
I
it's
see.
called a Prairie Fire emergency. Because
And it
sometimes we had teams, I had a couple situations where I knew we were compromised. We hadn't made enemy contact. So people would ask for a tactical emergency to get pulled out before the contact. But most of the times it would be enemy contact, and we always left under enemy fire. The only question was how much.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
And like we that the Echo 4 mission, Captain Tin told us that King Bee, he hovered for 10 minutes for us. That helicopter had 48 bullet holes in it,
Holy crow.
and nobody inside was killed.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so like just to go back to the King Bee helicopters that we were talking about earlier, they're kind of a big helicopter. They're not like they're bigger than a Huey, aren't they? Or
A little bit bigger than a Huey. They could carry um, maybe a comparative weight. I really forget
I
the
see.
specifics, but
Yeah.
I knew that they could carry a six-man team. That's why I
Right.
like the six-man team because, um, like with Echo 4, with contact, we got the whole team out with one helicopter. A lot of
Yeah.
times, the second helicopter comes in. The NVA knows they're not stupid. They know there's
Yeah.
less team members there. They would push harder to overrun the team as well as just shoot down a helicopter because they would get an award if they shot down a helicopter.
I see. And then and on this mission, you were trying to get a hold of Covey, but did it not take a little while?
Oh,
Like you weren't able to.
2 hours at least.
Yeah, and you were in contact the entire time. Is that correct? Or
Yeah, they kept coming at us, and we took turns. Sometimes it'd be a few guys, sometimes it'd be a whole wave. Again,
man,
we don't know how many. Just that they would
yeah,
open fire, and we literally blow them back into the jungle. At one point, Don came up to me and said, "Can you see what they're doing?" And I couldn't see it. And what the NVA had done, we had killed so many of their soldiers that they were stacking up the dead, and
man,
they wanted to get on top of the dead so they could get an angle to shoot down at us.
jeez, holy
It's
crow.
just like that sticks. I mean, that tells you about what we're up against.
Yeah, yeah, it just really puts everything into perspective. And again, like I said, having listened to the podcast, and also just so I don't forget, you also have your SOG cast, which is I've listened to 2 or 3 on those, are great podcasts as well.
Yeah, we just
But
posted a new one today. It's number 48 with Dick Thompson.
oh, right
Oh,
on. Okay, good. I'll check that out for sure.
oh yeah.
No, they're incredible stories, and like you say, I mean, that just puts it into perspective what you guys are up against. And it's the most humbling for me to talk to someone like yourself and like listen to these stories, because nothing that I've ever done comes even close to that, right? And I can't imagine how I would act and react or be able,
You're
whether
a
I'd have the
firefighter.
ability to have I, I don't know. That's a whole nother thing, like what you
Let
guys
me
are
tell
up
you, your
against.
job was too hot for me, buddy. I didn't want to be a firefighter.
Oh man. um, so eventually you got a hold of Covey on that mission,
Yeah.
and then air support started coming in, and we talked about the A1 Sky or the Sky Raider and the
Firefighter, yeah.
F4s. Yeah, I was lucky. On a side note, I was lucky to watch or see an F4 Phantom fly years ago. It's one of my favorite aircraft. I love air military jets, and I got to see one fly back in like '89, and it was awesome. Just to because they don't fly much anymore. I don't think
No.
if at all, right?
There's
But
only a few that, and they have to be really rich to keep them flying. Now, here's the thing about the F4 Phantom jet. When you go through training group, they tell you when you use a fast mover for tactical air, keep this in mind. The bullets will arrive before you hear the aircraft.
man,
Because with the musket gunships, the Sky Raiders, helicopters, um, any other aircraft, the Covey, you would all hear them coming. They're
I
coming.
see.
But with the Phantom jet, it's one thing to be told about the ordnance will get there before you hear it.
Yeah.
But when your head's down on the ground and they come through there with a minigun, the
Oh,
jungle just explodes. You don't hear anything.
yeah,
It comes
yeah.
and then you hear them hit the afterburner when they pull out.
When they're heading out, wow, holy
Amazing.
crow! Um, when you when you got a hold of Covey in this one, you were able to start now coordinating those attacks, and one of the things that that was interesting to me is it sounded like you would make a coordinated strike, or the Covey would coordinate the strike, and the MVA learned that if they push towards your team, that might offer some safety from that strike. Is that correct? Or
Correct. They called it close to the belt. They would want to get close to our belt because they could hear A1s or the helicopter gunships making their gun runs. They wanted to get as close to our belt. So we knew they were coming when they heard it. So there'd be that little death dance. We get more people coming towards us as they hear the Sky Raider. And it's
jeez,
all like within a matter of seconds, you know. They'd
yeah,
come
yeah,
at us, that we had to blow them back, and then they would strike with the airstrike. And that day we had napalm, bombs, cluster bomb units, and it's just they kept coming.
jeez, yeah, holy crow!
Oh yeah,
And how I one thing I wasn't too sure of was what led to you finding a landing or an extraction point for this one.
I didn't. It was Spider Parks.
Spider, okay,
Yeah, because he was flying Cubby, and because he'd been up there so long, he
yeah,
knew where we were. He said, "I don't see any LZ." He says, "I see a spot that it might be enough to get a helicopter to hover,"
I see.
and we hadn't seen it because we from where we were was a steep hill, but right behind us there was the elephant grass that we hadn't
Mm,
seen because
okay.
there was some jungle. We hit it. Then we're in the elephant grass trying to get to the king bee that was hovering there for 10 minutes.
Man, and so he came in hovering. You had to work through that elephant grass, and you were still fighting all the way back to the chopper, correct?
Right.
Yeah,
And so
and
everybody
right.
would be like, I was the first guy heading towards the helicopter because I was the biggest. I fell down. Woken ran over me. All the little people ran over me, literally on my back.
Oh,
And then
jeez.
Woken fell down, so I ran over him. So
Yeah,
as it turned out, it worked. We got us moving through the elephant grass. And then there'd always be somebody taking care of the rear security as we moved.
I see.
And then we get to the helicopter. Then Don and I threw everybody on the helicopter. And he went to throw me on. I slipped. I just grabbed him by his lapel and threw him up. And then he reached down and grabbed me, pulled me
And
out.
and that was you were down to your very last magazine. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Like your
last
last bullet?
magazine, last hand grenade. And
Yeah,
also, one of the gun runs was so close. That was the first time I had shell casings from their M60 machine guns, the 7.62. The shell casings landed in the back of my neck and they burnt my neck.
jeez.
So at first I'm going,
Holy
oh shit,
crow.
they're burning. Well, wait a minute. These are our friendly fire.
Yeah,
Thanks,
yeah.
guys. I'll take
Holy
the name.
And we that reminds me, we talked a little bit about the judge and the executioner. It sounded like those two pilots were unbelievable. They
Oh,
were part of the Marine Corps. Is that correct?
oh, no,
Or
no. They were the muskets out of
oh,
176th.
that's right.
They
Yeah.
came up from the Marical division. And they were assigned to us. They actually built a barracks on our base. And they
Wow.
stayed there they were based there permanently from July all the way through till they closed Fubai. The
Man.
judge and executioner were just amazing, fearless young
Yeah.
warrant officers, and we could regale you with many a story about them. Just
Man, I
unbelievable. And they're just like a lot of our other Americans that were from the 101st, the 1st Cav. Those, when we were in contact, they would come in close. And we had Scarface from the Marine Corps that
yeah,
were
that's right,
attached,
Scarface.
and Scarface was attached during the entire war for 8 years.
Man. Yeah, just incredible individuals all the way around to make everything come together. One thing too, so when you got on the one thing that struck me is when you got on the helicopter as a team, it was it wasn't like, obviously I have a huge respect for, like, athletics and sports and professional athletes and that. When you play a game, I've only ever done recreational sports, and you win the game, you got a sense of like overall like joy, and a lot of times there might be some cheering or whatever. When you guys got on there was none of that. That was just all quiet. Is that
Oh yeah.
correct? Like, it was kind of like somber. And it's just like it puts things into perspective that when things are that dangerous and that extreme, it's just that you're just thankful to be alive after those hours of being on the ground. Can you just talk to that a little bit, or?
Well, no, I mean you basically outlined the thought process, because in addition to that, when you're leaving, seeing all the gunfire coming, you don't know if you're going to even survive the exfiltration or not,
Right. Yeah, of
because
course.
they came,
Yeah.
you had to lift up out of the jungle and then get moving. So there's that little twilight zone time where it's going up, getting forward momentum, and it's all slow motion.
Yeah.
And they're
Holy
standing here
crow.
blasting away. When he
Yeah.
first told me 48 bullet holes, I'm going like, that's incredible. But then what I really thought about it, was like, only 48? Because so many people
Right.
were shooting at us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yes,
And
when you was there, it's like, you would smile, like Sal would give me a nod. And I was like,
yeah.
hey, welcome to the show. You've done good today. And that
Yeah.
would
Cause
be it.
that was your first big contact, was it
For
not?
me, yes,
Or
sir.
yeah. 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 And you had a funny one that the South Vietnamese soldiers kind of looked at you like, well, who's this tall guy, and is he going to actually fit in? And it sounds like that was a huge respect after that mission.
Well, when Spider introduced me to the team, Sal turned to Hep and said, he's too tall, his feet are too big, and he looks stupid. No, and Hep wouldn't
Jeez.
tell me that. Hep never told me that until after 6 or 7 months.
Is that right? Yeah.
Kept saying, hey, come on, Hep, what did Sal say that day?
Yeah.
He would change the topic.
Yeah.
So once I proved myself, and then he finally told me. He said, you're
Man.
okay. He said, you're
Yeah.
buku dinky dow, you're crazy, but you're okay. You're on the team.
So after that mission, then now you headed back to base, and then I would imagine there'd be a pretty big debriefing and
Every mission you had a debrief. There would be you go into S2, give a quick after action, and then the following day be much more detailed. They want to know everything from what the jungle vegetation was like, enemy forces, what we came up against, any kind of weapons, tactics, things like that. But Don was the
interesting.
team leader, so he did the majority of that. Whereas
I see.
when we landed, got back to Fubai, I went down to the mess hall, got food for the guys, got cold drinks out of the clubhouse, and took it from there.
One thing that, like, I'm well, and this is a big thing, like, for me, is Jocko has helped me out huge with leadership. I've been studying his stuff for about, I don't know, 5 or 7 years, and I've been lucky to meet him a couple times. And um, I'm fascinated with that topic. His teachings have helped me out huge with my job, and because there's a lot of things I didn't really understand about leadership. Obviously, I'm still learning and trying to be a better leader all the time. But what was it like for you in terms of, like, did you find that there was a lot of great leaders at FOB1, or was it a bit of a mix? And is it okay to chat about that a little bit, or?
Well, yeah, we had the majority of the SF men were just incredible. They had the only thing was the varying levels of experience and time on the ground.
I see.
So we had
Yeah.
senior NCOs like John McGovern, he was at E7, Pat Watkins, Spider Parks that had a lot of missions under their belt. So we always talked to them, excuse me, And when any of our contemporaries came back, like John Walton, John McIntyre, when anybody came back after a mission, after their debrief, we would talk to them
I see.
to
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
what they learned. Was there any change of tactics, any new weapons, any kind of issues with communications? Because there's always commo issues. We just carried that PRC 25 FM radio, but the NVA monitored it. Sometimes they would come on during the mission, during a firefight. We're trying to call in attack air. They would override it. They would play music, yell
Oh, I
at us.
see.
We would
Oh,
change
interesting.
channels. And they would try to change channels with us.
Interesting.
So the Covey rider would always be in contact with the 1-0, change channel, go up 5, down 5, and sometimes just go to the ERC-10 or emergency high frequency radio
I
to
see.
have commo because there's so much interference on FM.
Was that PR-25? Was that similar to what you see in the Vietnam movies where guys are carrying that huge radio on their back?
Yes.
Yeah, same kind of
Yeah,
thing.
we always carried it in our back in our rucksack, and then the NVA would always try to kill the radio operator first because he knew that was the commo link. We
Mm,
had a flexible antenna, and the flexible antenna would be under my arm or in the back sack, and then I have the actual handset would come underneath my arm into my jacket, so it'd be minimal visibility on the for the radio.
just a hugely important aspect of your mission
Oh yeah,
because to get out, you need to be able to communicate, and like that's your vital link back to home.
yeah. Then
Um,
there are times when you'd be on the ground, you have commo checks. So it got to the point when be a commo check. If we got inserted in the morning, there'd be a commo check at noon, 1 o'clock.
yeah,
It would be preordained, pre-planned, and when they come over, there'd be cubby riders saying, Idaho, how's it going down there? And I would just do a click, click on the handset
I see.
because the NVA and the Russians had extensive RDF, radio direction finding equipment that they could home
Interesting.
in and then triangulate it onto the team.
I see.
So we always
Right.
minimized when we were on the ground, minimized any commo to Covey or to the Airborne Command Center. We always have a commo check around midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. So it'd be morning, before night, going into the RON, and then around midnight, a commo check.
Right on. And just to make sure you're okay, we're at about an hour and 48 minutes in time. Are you okay for time, John? Or
Oh yeah, sure
yeah,
show.
okay. Yeah, good. I just want to make sure you're okay. That's awesome. So now when you wanted to chat about your other mission so we have the two books, Across the Fence and On the Ground. And you had a flashback at the beginning of the book and On the Ground, and that leads into the mission, um, uh, which is quite fascinating. Can we chat a little bit about the flashback, and like, is that something that you had quite frequently after the war? Because the intense, like, I can only imagine the intensity that you went through, and that obviously leaves a mark on anyone that's been through what you went through. Can we just chat a little bit about the flashback first, and then we'll get into like kind of what the mission was all about?
Yeah, that was a one time only flashback. I may have had a couple others, but that was the one that really stuck in my mind. Was at my daughter's piano lesson, and she was playing piano, and I was outside in the back porch in Vista, California. At the time, we lived in California, and in the background there were these huge grove of eucalyptus trees, and it was kind of a stormy day, but it wasn't raining. I'm on the back porch, so I could hear her talking to the teacher, hear the piano, and I'm on the back porch, and on the distance I could see those eucalyptus trees, and then all of a sudden it was like, bam! It was this mission that you're talking about,
Wow.
where we had gone. This was the one to go in to blow up enemy fuel lines, and when we got inserted, it was spotty. The weather was spotty. We got on the ground. We moved for a few hours. Um, Bubba had left a claymore with a booby trap on the LZ. So if anybody followed us, well, anyways, they hit that.
Right.
And we knew that they were down at the LZ and they would be looking for us. So we moved, got to a little bit higher ground, and Sal heard them coming at us from the north. Because apparently
Right.
there was several different patrol elements that were out looking for us. So we had contact to the north. Sal and Hep suppressed that. I declared a prairie fire emergency. And fortunately, on this mission, we got a hold of Covey really quick. It wasn't Spider. I forget who the Covey was, but the Covey rider came out, located us, and then we began to call in TAC Air. And he said, it's near the end of the day. It's starting to rain. The weather's closing in. I don't know if we're going to be able to get you out or not. So that's part of our drama. And there's no LZ. So we made contact. We were on, I forget for how long, but we used some of our claymores. They came at us from the north. Hep and South took care of that. There was contact later to the east and the south. I forget the exact, but they kept coming at us from different locations.
Right.
Blowing them back, blowing them back. And finally, Covey said, there's a little area that you might be able to get strings down to you all. You got to go to the north. Well, Sal and Hep were not happy about that because that's where we had the initial contact. But anyways,
Right.
we went up, went past the dead bodies because we didn't have time to pick up any intel. We wanted to get to the clearing because we were fighting against the weather and it was starting to rain. So we get to the clearing. It was a small clearing, and Bubba put down some C4 to try to blow down some trees so the helicopter could get in to pick us up. Well, he blew them, cut them off, but there was so much vegetation that when the trees got blown off the stump, they just fell on other trees, never landed.
Oh no, didn't
So
clear
then it was
properly.
like, okay, now we're in this with all the trees, smoke, and everything from John blowing up the trees, trying to clear the LZ a little. The enemy kept coming at us, and then we finally said, "Okay, they're going to drop strings." And so the flashback was from the moment when I look up and the first helicopter comes in. So at the piano lesson, I can see the trees moving, and I remember that helicopter because it was so high. It was like triple canopy. They threw down the ropes with a sandbag on it, and the wind was blowing. It's raining. He's up there hovering and going like, "Oh, this might not go well."
Yeah.
So anyway, we made contact, continued with contact on and off. Our people hooked into their web gear, and actually we had a Swiss seats, and they were a 12-foot piece of rope. It goes around your waist and through your groin, and they had a D-ring on it. And then the rope would come down with a sandbag with a D-ring. You hooked into it, and then you had a D-ring on your harness you hooked into. So if you
Okay.
got shot, you would stay on the rope, not
You would still
shot
hang
off.
there.
We had people
Wow.
that didn't do that, that got shot off literally out of their seat.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
So we're doing that, and then I told Bubba, I said, "Hey, when we get pulled out of here, get a claymore mine." He had a claymore with a white phosphorus on it, taped to it. I said, "Put that up there and put a time fuse on it, so that when we're going up, this will go off." He goes, "No." I said, "No, do it. We got to get out of here, and
Yeah.
anything we could do to buy time, because the helicopter had to go up before, unless he drug us through the jungle."
Yeah. Through the canopy.
We
Yeah.
did it. The guy, and then the cubby goes, "We're going to do 2 helicopters." Well, 4 ropes came down. I put 4 of the little people on 2 ropes. Bubba had one, I had one, and I gave him the signal to pull us up. And only by the grace of the Lord did we get out there that day.
Yeah.
We pulled up. That claymore exploded with the white phosphorus. It was just incredible. You see the
Yeah.
enemy down there. Of course, there were those that died from the blast, and then
Mm.
beyond the periphery, you could see them shooting at us as we're leaving.
Jeez.
And so then I
Well,
called Covey and said, "We're all out.
yeah.
The entire team is out."
Well, and that's a fascinating part of it because I was thinking about that where They were going to try to extract just part of the team with one helicopter, and that becomes a weight issue. How high would those ropes be approximately? Like 100 feet or?
Over 100 feet. I want to say maybe
Jeez.
150.
Yeah, so that chopper's hovering there. They're worried about weight, but you're having to make kind of an executive decision on the ground. It's like, no, 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 we need to get everybody out now. And like you say, by the grace of God, like that chopper did its job and pulled you out through
Oh,
the.
yeah.
And it sounded like you guys had to work through the canopy a little bit still to kind of get past the branches.
We always had that pinball syndrome, we're in
Yeah,
a pinball ricocheting off of trees, but that's okay because they got us up through most of it, and then there was so much enemy gunfire, and after that claymore went off with the white phosphorus, they just freaked out.
man,
And so there's two things. It was cold because it was raining, and we weren't like in Laos where they had higher mountains. The mountains we were in weren't as high as the normal mountains. There was a
I
target
see.
that was closer to South Vietnam.
Okay,
And so, in my mind, elevation, cold, we know that UAs could pull us out with that weight.
I see.
So I
I
made
see.
the rolled the dice because the weather was closing, and by now it's raining. And of course, we're getting pulled after we get pulled out, after we get done being a pinball, getting ricocheted off the jungle to get out. Now we're riding and it's in the rain, so the rain's like pellets on our face and everything.
Holy man, and cold. I bet.
Oh, just froze our balls off.
just
And then
just
when you're
frozen.
riding in that Swiss seat, after a while, you lose all circulation in your legs. So when you land, you
Yeah.
can't walk. You land. Sometimes we had teams that got drugged through barbed wire
Oh,
or
geez.
get drugged down a runway because there would be like sometimes be one person be lower and maybe the door gunner wouldn't see the person low. So he'd be telling the helicopter pilot for the people up here, get them in without realizing there was somebody dangling.
Oh
Oh, we had
man,
bad
and they would
stories. People
they'd
getting
carry
hurt.
you all the way back to FOB1 that way, or
No, it would be once we crossed the border, get back to
okay.
South Vietnam, they had um, hilltops where they had artillery set up.
Oh, okay.
And so sometimes we try to land there. It would depend.
Right,
I mean, one time we
right.
landed in the middle of the Ashaw Valley.
Oh wow.
And it's like, oh my God. But, and we couldn't walk. So, they had to come out and help us get into the helicopter.
We're on. I'm part of our high angle team at work, so we're responsible for rope rescue. And our area doesn't get a lot of rope rescue because we don't have a ton of like mountains. There is areas in this region that we live in that have extreme mountains and like lots of things going on. The North, we have a group called the North Shore Search and Rescue, and they do amazing things. And but that being said, our gear is quite Gucci. It's quite nice. And I'm thinking, trying to compare to what you had. And like we have like double redundancy, two ropes on everything, like this stuff's like 10,000 pounds strength. And so like comparatively, it sounds like that Swiss seat and whatnot was just, like probably a little bit scary to be getting hooked into. Is that correct, or is that just
Oh,
kind of what you're
absolutely.
used
But
to?
again, given
Yeah,
the alternative, stay here and
yeah,
hang out
yeah.
overnight with the NVA
That's right.
or
Yeah,
take the ride. We took the ride.
yeah, I took the the other thing that we didn't chat about too much and is you guys' use of claymores. It's quite fascinating because I've always ever thought of claymore mines as just something you set up and like someone comes along, trips it, and as maybe a protection barrier. But you guys use them for quite a few different roles. Is that like? Could you just chat about that a little bit?
Yeah,
Or
the Claymore mine was I'm trying to think it'd be maybe like the general size of something like this and have a bend to it. And the front
right,
said face towards enemy. It would have, I think, 500 or 600 ball bearings with plastic explosives. So when you detonated it, there would be the wall of ball bearings that would go out,
right,
killing. And I forget what the radius was, but it was very impressive. The primary use was for RON security, so that we set up the RON at night. You put out claymores, so if any enemy hit us, you could blow out the claymores. Tactically, once you're in contact, like that missionaire, we had used claymores. When as we were going to the LZ, Bubba put them down with time fuses on them. When
right.
we were down we ran a mission out of Cambodia on Thanksgiving Day. and we found an NVA base camp. They came at us hard. It was flat, more open, and we used the claymores extensively with the clacker, with time fuses, and a couple times we put down claymores with a 5-second fuse. They were
Jeez,
getting that close to it. You put it down, put it up against a tree, and you go the other way, and that
man.
would blow up, and that would slow down the NVA enough that we could get
Wow.
back to the LZ.
I imagine if nothing else, if you set out on a 5 second fuse and they're chasing you, even if you didn't, if even if they didn't receive like injury or casualty, the just explosion alone would make them pause for a
Oh yeah.
while. So you could get a little bit farther away.
Well, and then plus they ran into it, and like one of our guys, well, Dick Thompson, he's done his books. It's called Code Name SOG, Code Name Dynamite, and
Right on.
he went very heavy. At night, he would set up a perimeter with 7 claymores all chained together, and then
Yeah.
behind it there would be 3 claymores.
Oh,
He was
geez. Wow.
he carried more claymores per team than any team I ever heard of, and he used
Interesting.
them
And he used them a
actively.
lot. Wow.
Oh yeah, and then of course we use them in ambushes. So we have an ambush with a kill zone with plastic explosive that would knock one person out. Then the claymores would kill everybody else in on the trail. Then we had claymores on the side security and rear security. So if any
Wow.
enemy hit us, we could blow the claymore off.
One thing too, like just going back to we briefly talked about sapper and soldiers, and it's interesting. I did a little bit of research on that, and one of my guys on my crew right now is an ex-combat engineer out of the British Army, and I didn't realize this, but that combat engineer term was they called themselves sappers,
Oh yeah,
but in the Viet Cong or the North Vietnamese Army, the sappers were more commando based. Is that correct?
correct. They
Like,
were trained
yeah,
by '68. The end of '68, early '69, they had a battalion of sappers that were trained in Laos. They trained up to come for us,
wow,
and they were trained to find us. Then when they found a team, their top commandos would come in wearing a loincloth, maybe a bandana with an AK or a satchel charge with 1 or 2 magazines, and maybe
man,
some kind of footwear. So they would come in. They were very stealthy. So we were very fortunate. We never had direct contact with them. But as I said in the beginning, on the mission on January 1st, '69, and November 3rd, and November the 10th of '69, we had teams that got hit by sappers.
is that
All the
right? Wow,
Americans left the indigenous alive. And
mm,
so by end of '69, early '70, they had over 2 battalions trained up just we called them SOG, hunter killer teams.
hmm. Man, that's just terrifying. Like in my mind, that's just I can't imagine. And is it true? Like going back to the claymores, that they would sometimes try to come in and turn those claymores around. Like if you guys were in an RON, like a rest overnight position, they would come in and try to find your claymores and turn them around on you.
That was a concern we always had.
Yeah,
Again, we never had that on our team. And there were, I don't remember any team directly, but I know some of the A camps, Green Beret A camps, where the enemy would get in and turn the claymore around so you detonated it, would come back into the camp.
man, that's just man. The other thing, a little bit different but related topic was like how was it at nighttime for you? Because I can't imagine how dark that would be in a triple canopy, covering. Was it just like pitch black, or how like could you see anything?
It was darker than pitch black. You could put your hand in front of your face, you could feel the breeze, and it would be this close, but you couldn't see it.
Jeez,
And we had
man.
no night vision at that time. They
Yeah,
had a little,
yeah.
they had a starlight scope that was the early night vision, but it was big, long, and heavy. We
Right,
never took it
yeah.
to the field, just too much weight.
Too much weight. And what were some of the other? You were saying earlier that you got to play with some pretty cool state of the art equipment. What were some of the other cool things that you got to play with at that time that kind of that you remember?
Well, part of our training was not only did we train on our weapons, but we trained on enemy weapons. Then we
Oh yeah.
also had a choice. They had like grease guns, the Swedish Ks, Sten
Oh wow.
guns,
Yeah.
and a few of those were with silencers.
Oh,
So
interesting.
some guys, they carried them a few times with the idea that they would take him out for an ambush where they could kill somebody and have a complete silence. Nobody
Interesting.
hear the
Yeah.
rounds being fired. And then we had
Interesting. Yeah.
experimental things like they had a rocket launcher for a weapon, and it was handheld. It was in one of the James Bond movies. They actually used something like that.
Oh really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and when it fired, like with the first 2 or 3 feet, if it hit you, it wouldn't be too hard, but it got propulsion going. But once it got going, it hit. And we had one of our teams that carried him out, and they fired it and misfired it in the jungle. So we stopped. Nobody carried him to the field after that.
I see. Yeah. And I remember one of the missions that you were chatting about. It's kind of funny now, but like at the time, it was probably state of the art. Is you had to the guys had to input a tape cassette, and that was like state of the art back then. Is
Oh,
that true?
absolute state of art. That's we did our wiretaps,
Yeah.
and so like and against our South Vietnamese, they could climb the telephone pole or the tree where the wires were. They would climb up, put the wiretap in, then climb down the tree and put mud on the pole, so if anybody's walking, they wouldn't see the wire.
Man.
And then they hook into it, then monitor it. And the
Right.
CIA told us to always do the recording, even if we didn't hear any talk, because the NVA phones, when they put them in the cradle, they were still alive.
Oh, I see.
And so
So
the CIA would return the tapes, and of course, we never hear anything back, but they would amplify them 100 times. And they
I
said they
see.
got intel for those off of those phone conversations.
So you would leave that tape cassette there, and then come back and grab the tape and
Oh
like
no, no, we
swap it
always
out.
carried it with us.
Oh,
So
I
like
see. Okay.
we'd tap, it was time to move, they pull it down, then we
Pull it
go
down.
out.
I got you. I got you. Okay. Interesting.
Now, the
Um,
Air Force sensors, we put them in, there would be a central unit with two coaxial cables, and they were all buried. Everything was buried, had just an antenna showing. So any traffic that came back and forth, it would monitor it. Then the Air Force would come in and monitor what they picked up.
oh, it's like for road traffic.
Road traffic, human, animals, whatever.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah. Wow. No, that's amazing. We've covered a lot of ground here already today. Is there anything else that like that you could share with us, like that comes to mind, or any like highlights that other than that, I mean, those are a couple of key ones, but I know there's so many more, and I'd love to do this again, of course, with you. But anything else that you could share with
Well,
the listeners?
no, I just think that no, when we had April 30th, 1975, and today's veterans had August of 2021.
Mm.
The disgraceful pullout of Afghanistan in such a way left behind equipment had 13 people killed at the Abbey Gate. And the only difference was, like in my case, I was just a poor reporter at a local newspaper
Right.
and just living paycheck to paycheck and couldn't do much to help our little people, guys that got me out alive. Whereas Afghanistan vets, um, they had cell phones, and our
Mm.
SF people were able to help get thousands of Afghan allies out of the country. In
Yeah.
fact, SOGcast number 46, we interviewed one of our guys who's Tom Lanning. He was a technician for SOGcast. He was a
Mm.
fifth group. He helped over 1,000 people get out of
Wow.
Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And he did this
That-
while he was in the Army at night on his spare time. Sometimes he'd be juggling 2 or 3 cell phones.
Wow. Holy crow. That's, I think Tim Kennedy had chatted quite a bit about that too. I think he had a bit of an involvement with trying to get people out of Afghanistan as well.
Yes, he did. I've never listened to Tim's podcast enough, but I've seen a couple of snippets
Mm.
of him talking about that experience, those experiences. And like in my case, um, whenever I look back on it, it's like the men I served with, both the Green Berets. I always judge people. Any guy that I meet today, I judge them against the people I served with, including
Yeah.
my South Vietnamese. I'm alive today thanks to them, the King D
Yeah.
pilots, our TAC Air. It was a great team effort, fighting communism.
Just incredible individuals all the way around. Well, you did 2 tours, is that correct, John?
I went
And
back for a second tour, and I extended my enlistment in the Army so I could get back on my recon team. And so basically it was a 5-month extension. So
I
when I was
see.
there, me and the CEO had words in April 1970, and came home 2 weeks later. Got out of the
Interesting. Yeah.
Army because the
Yeah.
reduction of force was coming. And to this day, I've just been very grateful for the people that I served with and those who put their
Yeah.
lives on the line for the teams on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, again, like, thank you for your service and all your teammates. It's it's just one of the most humbling stories that I've ever heard. And when you came out of the military, you went into eventually you became well, of course, an author, but you were a reporter for quite a while. Is that true?
I don't talk about it anymore because the media today is such an embarrassment.
Mm,
I mean, it's not real media anymore. It's just they have the mass media just seems to be programmed
yeah.
for more propaganda as opposed to reporting news.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
the decisions about stories they don't print. We won't print
Yeah.
any stories. I mean, NPR was proud of the fact that they refused to print a story about Hunter Biden's laptop. That's
Yeah.
the epitome of journalistic corruption,
Right. Yeah.
in my
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah. Yeah, because journalists normally try to find the news and report on what's going on and
Yeah,
whatnot. But
report both sides of the story,
yeah, yeah,
not
for
just be
sure.
so Biden, but we can get into another whole
Yeah, for
on that.
sure. Yeah, no,
It's
absolutely.
very
One
frustrating.
question. One
Look what
question
they're
I'm
doing right now. I
asking.
mean, Joe Biden's been hiding for 5 or 6 days. Nobody knows where he is.
Right.
Excuse
Yeah.
me?
Yeah.
And the
Strange. Yeah.
most of mass media goes, well, the White House said he's really, is he dead or not? Or is he alive? What's the story? We don't know.
Yeah. No. No. It's so strange. So such strange times. One question that I'm trying to ask all of the people that come on the podcast is, I don't know if do you drink coffee by chance or?
Is the Pope Catholic? Do you like sex?
So one question I ask everyone is, if you were to have a cup of coffee with anyone, historically alive or past, is
Right.
there anyone that you would that comes to mind that you'd want to have coffee with?
George Washington.
Oh, right on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, and that'd be an amazing conversation, right?
Indeed.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been saying, because I with a couple other guests, I've been saying Napoleon is one that I'd love to have a conversation with, like maybe a couple of days outside of one of his big battles in a tent, just to kind of have a chat and sort of sit down and, sort of, pick his brain on his tactics and the different things that he's done. But
Oh, yeah, that
yeah.
would be, we need an interpreter.
Yeah, that's right. I would actually. Yeah.
And
That's
again, there's
right.
always Winston Churchill.
Yeah, yeah, that's another big one that comes up a lot. People would love to have a sit down with Winston Churchill. And I said to my one friend Stefan, "Yeah, I guess you'd have tea with him." And he laughed at me. He goes, "No, Winston would definitely want, a whiskey or something along those lines." Or
Indeed. Sure.
well, thank you so much, John. I've got about a million other questions, and I'd love to chat about all the other missions too. But I figure, like, this is a couple hours, and your time is valuable too. And I appreciate you coming on and taking the time to chat with me about this. It's been great.
Oh, thank you. It's my honor, and always glad to talk to a firefighter, a hardworking firefighter.
Oh, thank you.
They
Yeah,
will hear more of
it
your stories.
it's the fire service has been a blessing for me. I came from not a lot, and it really, I had a lot of guys that were real, like, kind of like almost like dad figures for me, and they really guided me along the way, or father figures, and it kind of really set me on a good track. And it's allowed me. I've got between career and volunteer time about 33 years now. So it's
Wow.
been a terrific journey for sure. Lots of adventures. Nothing like yours, but
Well,
but fun.
my wife's cousin is Ray Hamill. He was a firefighter with LA Fire,
Oh, right on.
and he
Yeah.
had incredible stories. I mean, they lost men.
Yeah.
And there was one fire he was fighting. He was on the roof, and they caught it on camera when the roof collapsed. He
Oh
survived
man.
it.
Yeah.
So, oh yeah,
Those.
and in Trenton, we had some horrific fires there where we lost
Yeah.
firefighters. It's just like unbelievable. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of risk
It's
involved fighting fires.
it's one of those things, I try to say to the young fellas, and that is just, don't get complacent, because this job can bite, if you're not on your game, right? So it's definitely one of those things where it's important to try to train and be aware, and hopefully everyone goes home safe at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, John. I appreciate your time. It's great. I hope maybe in the future we can have you back on. That'd be amazing, and
We'll
chat
work
some
on
about
it,
some
Reed.
more.
Remember my
Yeah.
motto: with your skill and your talent, we can go places.
Thank you so much, John. I apprciate it. That's
Until next
awesome.
time, God bless.
Thank you. That's great.